Vasquez came off the bench, scored in the opener against Jamaica. We all thought he might start last night's game. When the team sheet came out and it was Jesus Ferreira, it was a bit of a letdown. And then Ferreira goes out and bags a hat trick, his second international hat trick. He's only the 5th U.S. player to score multiple hat tricks, joining Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, Josie Altidore, and Peter Millar. He also, last night, became the fastest U.S. player to reach double-digit goals. He's now up to 11 goals in 20 appearances. He is fast becoming one of the most polarizing players in U.S. national team history, because there is a type of person out there on Twitter that likes to discredit anything he does. And to be fair, I mentioned it's his second hat trick. The previous one was a Nations League game against Grenada, in which he scored 4 goals. So 7 of his 11 goals have come against Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis. What do you make of the whole Jesus Ferreira dynamic?
Jesus Ferreira has become the new Jossie Zardes, okay? And what's the relationship? Well, they both play in Major League Soccer. If Jesus Ferreira had done the exact same thing and was playing, we just talked about the Eredivisie. If he was playing over there for whatever team, insert your team, I think the conversation would be very different and the perception of Jesus Ferreira would be very different. That's just the reality of the situation. And that's also how many anti-MLSers out there have dug their heels in. There was a time where it was, I just don't think that MLS is good, and I think that players aren't as good that are coming from MLS, but I'll accept them. Now it's, if you have an MLS tag, you are not as good, you should not be called in, and it doesn't matter what you're doing as a soccer player, you're just not as good. By the way, that applies to coaches too, in terms of some of the sentiment out there. Jesus, but context is important when talking about Jesus Ferreira as a goal scorer. It's not his fault, okay? You play who is in front of you. And if it's Eric Winalda or Brian McBride or Josie Altidore or Landon Donovan or Miroslav Klose or anybody, if you look at their history of scoring goals, they are going to, at a certain point, come up against inferior opposition. And we did the show last night with Landon Donovan, who's working with us on our Gold Cup broadcasting. We'll talk about him a little later in the show. But at one point he talked about how these games, from a mentality perspective, if you're a goal scorer, you're licking your chops because you can pad your stats, but you still have to be able to go out there and do this. This gets into a bigger discussion about this game and perspective. And, I talked about this game when we came on air, and I said that I wanted to see dominance, but with perspective and with an understanding of the vastly inferior competition that you are facing in this team. But I don't think, while I think it's fair to talk about who Jesus Ferreira has scored on, and now we're at 11 goals in 20 games or something like that?
Correct.
That's a pretty good goals to game ratio. And then immediately when you say that, people are going to say, yes, but, and they asterisk until he is consistently scoring against what we all would consider elite competition. But that's the goal for anybody on the U.S. men's national team. And what's he supposed to say? No, I'm not going to come in. I'm not going to play against these teams. No, you play the teams that's in front of you. And we all, I guess, take it with a grain of salt. But in my expert opinion, it's still better for a goal scorer to be scoring goals, regardless of who the competition is, than to not be scoring goals at all. And yes, I do want him to score when it comes to, later on this year, if they're playing Germany or, big elite teams. That's ultimately what is going to take us to the promised land. But we still have anybody, notwithstanding the recent arrival of Flo Balogun, we still have nobody that has grabbed a hold of it. And by the way, Jesus Ferreira has been given time and time again opportunities to grab a hold of it and still has not, to the extent that I think people want, grabbed a hold of that spot.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.